This episode of SESSLERS Something is brought to you by Dead Island Riptide. All right, the quarter is over with GDC. This has been an overwhelming tsunami of content and game releases, which is a wonderful thing on one hand because it gives us something to cover, but there's that point where you're like, I want to breathe, I want to read a book, I want to poop. You know, those kind of small things that you really, really aim for in life. But it's done. Looking back on GDC week, many great things. Please check out the content that's on the site. There's some great interviews that are already up, and there's even more to come, not just this week, but the following week. I gotta say though, the event that stands out to me was something that happened on the first day of GDC week, on the Monday. Sony put together a small event that highlighted their new movement with regard to indie and free-to-play games. They've made their platform a lot more open and accessible. They streamlined the process by which the developers can get onto PSN. It used to be a multi-stage process. They're trying to make it quick and easy because they want to put the games up there. And that is a very impressive move, especially when you consider that the last time we heard about the PS4, it was kind of the big Wall Street approach. Jonathan Blow did come out and that signaled that they were going to do something with indie games, but it was really about the console and the big vision and the dreams. And so for the next thing that they say is about indie games, that's a pretty hefty philosophical shift. And I think it shows that A, Sony knows they got beat up in the last generation and they have to change, and they're aware of the landscape. iOS and Android and other emerging platforms are creating this very fertile ground that is becoming competitive, and they want to be able to move into that as well and not have the same barriers that both Microsoft and Sony have put up in the past. Now, what's the benefit of indie games? I don't know how much money they're going to make, especially considering that the developer can set their own pricing, be it free, be it $1, or be it $10. I don't know how they make money on it, but what you do allow for is that soil where people can experiment. There's a game called Dive Kick. It makes fun of a lot of fighting games out there that, you know, back in the old days, there was always that one overpowered move. A lot of it were the kicks that came from the sky, and this game is just that move. Both characters do it. It has a little bit more sophistication than that, but you really find a lot of depth. Who is going to invest in a game that has one gameplay mechanic? You're not going to see that from EA. You're not going to see that from Sony. It has to come from an indie developer. And it's what those ideas, that kind of experimentation where the risk barrier is so low, that can allow for ideas to percolate and filter up into the big boy AAA games that you and I have been complaining feel so similar and so stale. Now, like I said, I don't know where the benefits are in the short term for Sony on this, but in the long term, we can start to see where they're coming from. Shu Yoshida, one of the most creative minds in all of games, and who nurtured games like Ico and Shadow of the Colossus and Journey. To see him there at that event really shows that there is a significant interest in it. And I think it's just good for games in general. Now, the one question I still have, and I think this is a question that many people have when you look at any indie games platform, is curation. So many games come out without the traditional PR or marketing that the good stuff can get lost. Yeah, we have a Limbo. Yeah, we have a Spelunky. But I know there's something out there that I want to play and I want to tell you guys about it. But someone's got to find the solution to make the cream rise above the milk. Before I answer your questions, it's time to thank our sponsor, Dead Island Riptide. The game is coming out on April 23rd, 360, PS3, and PC. It's a follow-up to the first Dead Island that offers up new locations and the ability to import your saves from the first game. And you still get to, find things to pick up and bash the undead over the head with it. This comes from JP Garcia 6. As somebody who works in gaming retail, I often hear people say games like BioShock Infinite, Dishonored, Borderlands, etc., quote, have bad graphics because they aren't hyper-realistic, like Battlefield 3 or Crysis. When in reality, that's just the art direction the developers were going for. What are your opinions on realistic graphics versus stylized graphics in this dilemma? Do you feel there is an overabundance of games trying to be realistic, and do you wish there were more games that weren't gray-brown? Thank you very much for the question. I also hear this a lot. As to the gray-brown, I think that we've convinced ourselves there's more games like that than there actually are. But as the idea of the realistic game being somehow more valuable, I think that, along with the idea that a linear game is inherently bad, is part of these terms that get coined ever so often and then become a truism. and no one sort of steps back and questions it. I prefer games with art direction because you see the sense of invention. I live in reality. I can walk out the door and look at a building. I don't really need to see a building recreated just as it is in a game. Sometimes it works, but sometimes it just feels like it's graphics porn or something I'm supposed to get excited about. I think one of the best examples is EA's recent release of all the footage from Battlefield 4. Oh, technically, it's great, but it's kind of soulless. It's kind of cold. It doesn't convey any type of energy or an excitement. It just seems to be so getting off on its own zeros and ones of what can be represented on screen that you can almost sense how the gameplay is secondary to what you can show your friends when you're playing it. All right, guys, one other thing. We're doing another Address the SES this week. You can check it out. It's Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Just go to the link below. Then you can just get in the mess. We're going to have a bunch of people on video. You can join in the chat. It was a huge success 2 weeks ago. We're hoping to do it again. And there will be a certain surprise because I might look a little different than I do now.